Last year I decided to get my Class 1 articulated lorry licence. So when I'm not standing on stages around the world, I'm driving big trucks around the UK. And the reason I mention my watch is, while I'm driving, I love it. I listen to podcasts, I kind of get in the zone, and I start to think better, and I'll have ideas. And nowadays I can just lift my arm up, I wouldn't do it, and I can say, hey, slow-mo, remind me to do this, or dictate an idea, or even send messages to people. So effectively, I've been able to take responsibility, if you like, for where I work, when I work, and how I work, in a way that I think is actually what we're talking about with digital transformation. And with that comes, I think, a whole set of changing expectations. And again, slightly back to that thing about the whole workplace thing. I don't think our expectations are currently shifting. So I've watched my wife go through in the last year or so a number of different corporate jobs, and different types of work, different types of organisations, but all still, to me, looking and feeling very corporate. Different buildings, different sorts of work, but the same underlying attitudes. But I think we're increasingly going to see, and George referenced this, certainly Gen Z, and I'm not a big fan of the generation thing, being a silver surfer myself, but I do think there are changing attitudes coming up, a more sceptical attitude to the idea of a lifetime job, the idea of giving up something about yourself to work in that lifetime job. Those are becoming much less credible than they used to be. And then at the same time, you've got this thing called digital transformation, which is the fact that organisations are trying to shift in this direction that's enabled by all these tools and technologies. But it sort of gets mangled up in translation. I saw a job description the other day there in LinkedIn, Head of Digital Transformation. And frankly, I understood about 30% of it. It was just more jargon and more words about stuff that I thought, what does that actually mean? And it also slightly, it became clear it was a marketing job, it was a comms job. So it was around digital meaning, communication and marketing, not about changing the way we do things. So again, very confusing messages being sent around this. But again, for me, I think what it's actually about is shadow IT. It's the fact that increasingly people are taking their own effectiveness literally into their own hands. And you see this in the form of people having one phone for work and one phone for home. Or I sat with the director of HR for a big company the other day there who, sitting in front of her beige corporate computer at a desk, with her phone sitting beside her, and said mischievously, guess which I use all day. Or working with a financial organisation in a highly regulated industry in Hong Kong, where the board came up to me and confessed individually that they used WhatsApp to talk to each other, because they'd got tired of IT, but waiting for IT to give them a secure and professional alternative. So I think that shift, the ubiquitous personal technology is bringing about, is actually what we're talking about in terms of digital transformation. It's more of a cultural shift than it is anything to do with technology. And it takes a huge shift. I mean, just talking to Chris earlier, I mean, each of the professions that this affects, people like property, finance, IT, HR, all of these suffer from what I call the perils of professionalism. So they become a profession, they have their rules, they have their dogma, they have their aspirations, and have sort of lost direction in terms of enabling people to do things. And people are taking back some of that ownership. And I often think that Starbucks is, if you like, the property, the premises equivalent of shadow IT. It's the fact that when I meet people in large organisations, invariably we don't meet in their building, we meet in somewhere local that they like, that they feel comfortable in, that we can have, frankly, a better conversation. And I also don't have to fight my way past the front desk to even have the conversation with them. So I think, again, it's this personalisation, taking ownership, flexibility thing that's going on. And I also think it's because we have always worked in networks. You know, in the BBC, we had all the formal organisation charts and all the stuff that you get with the hierarchy and the structures. But actually what made the BBC work was the network of people who knew each other, trusted each other, were comfortable in each other's company. And what I guess I became known for was enabling social networking inside the BBC, so giving people the technology to allow them to have the sort of cross-functional, cross-boundary conversations that we're having on the internet. But it's also about the fact that it's autonomous individuals. It's people who are able to, Neil mentioned this, it's adults who are able to take responsibility for engaging with the people they need to talk to get their jobs done. And in the face of some of the stuff that George was talking about, I think this is incredibly important. That in a sense, and you also referenced, George, the education system. I've got 2 daughters who've just come through that system, and the schooling system is really not about enabling people for the future. Because I think the future is going to involve autonomous networks of thoughtful individuals. So many of the things we've trained out of people, you know, we've basically wanted compliant, complacent consumers. What we need are thoughtful, creative, edgy and troublemaking individuals, because that's the way you're going to add value. So think harder, think better, share more with people, be braver about sharing more with people. I mean, counterintuitively, all the things that used to keep you safe in a job, of keeping your head down and not making any fuss or not ruffling too many feathers, that's the riskiest thing you can do. Because I've got a technology that can replace you relatively quickly. So I was in Australia talking to a group about workplace stuff, and I had just been at a conference where they were demonstrating chatbots used in HR. And interestingly enough, I told this story yesterday. Somebody asked me, what's a chatbot? Which is a good reminder that you can't assume that everybody knows what we're talking about. Because a chatbot is basically a technology that's automated that will respond increasingly intelligently to questions and answers or interactions with humans. And especially in the call center world, they're becoming increasingly sophisticated. They can work out roughly what demographic, what age, what background you are, what kind of language you're comfortable with, so that the interactions feel more intuitive for you. And I guess Siri is an example of this as well. You know, if I ask Siri to do something, I'll say please and thank you. So I'm beginning to have some sort of relationship. So this chatbot thing in HR was allowing people to navigate their way to the answer to a question. So rather than trying to find stuff on the internet, which is really horrendous, or trying to get hold of a call center, which is doing HR these days, interacting with a chatbot lets you get an answer to your question about policy or whatever relatively painlessly and quickly. So at this conference in Sydney, I was slightly mischievously asked, it was about 60 people. I said, given that technology, how many of you would be comfortable on a daily basis interacting with a chatbot rather than your current line manager? And more than half the room put their hands up. Right, which is as much a comment about management as it is about the technology. But I think people are talking about this already being used in old folks' homes with people with disability, you know, getting increasingly difficult, lonely, not making connections with people, not able to make connections with people. You know, having an Alexa box in the corner that's able to interact with you produces some sort of relationship, some sort of connection. And this is, I think, Lucia, which I was just playing with the other day. There's some guy that was involved in developing this, and this is actually being used for therapeutic activity. So this is if people are suffering from extreme depression or other psychological challenges. WUSA is a chatbot that will just give them somebody to talk to once a day. And it's backed by AI, it's backed by lots of studying. George? Yeah, exactly, it's emotional AI. So okay, so I'm how to put this? I sometimes think the things are overstated. I don't think computers will ever fully understand. You know, I find myself reading a lot about consciousness these days, and what does consciousness actually mean? And what does being human actually mean? Because we're about to be at real risk of it being replaced by technology. So we need to work out what it means. But yes, emotional empathy. So when I talk about my online life, I have sometimes people say, well, but face-to-face is still the best form of interaction. Frankly, I've had some pretty disappointing face-to-face experiences. Sometimes your flesh and blood human is not all that it's cracked up to be.
But that's your face.
Exactly. So, you know, I think we're in this really interesting transition point where in extreme enough circumstances, for enough good reasons, more of us are beginning to get comfortable with relating to technology in a whole new way. So what does this mean? I mean, it is, whatever the timescales, and George and I will probably argue about this afterwards, we are definitely heading into a fundamentally different technologically enabled world, which is going to provoke deep questions about why we do things, how we do things. The whole issue of digital ethics, I think, is just going to become, it's already really important. Just watching, you know, somebody said the other day, that, forgive me for the Google lady who she's gone now, but you know, somebody said if you want to murder somebody and get away with it, hide the body on the second page of Google search results, because nobody will ever find it. It's the fact that we're already being steered in what we think the truth is, what we know as fact, by algorithms. We're already in this world. And I think it calls for a different style of management. You know, I mentioned the org chart at the BBC. Most, I would suggest, management still see themselves in that, you know, crowd control, trying to keep a lid on things, trying to manage resources, not getting things to fall off the tracks, all those sorts of good things that they thought they were there for. But actually, as we saw, potentially I've got a bot that can do a lot of that. I can get a bot that can send emails, that can tell people off for being late for work 4 times in a row, whatever. What we need are people who see this coming, who get excited about this, who see the potential in this and can help people to transition. Because I genuinely really worry. You know, previous technology changes have affected all sorts of other groups, but this one is aimed squarely at the middle class. You know, it's aimed at the white-collar knowledge workers. You've got degrees, you've got good jobs, you're pleased with the status they have in that role. That's the section of society that we're going to have decimated over the next 10, 20 years. And we're sort of stumbling into it without really talking about it or thinking about it too much. But also I think it's a different sense of place. And again, Neil sort of touched on this, but it's how does a place make me feel? You know, I think this is true even of online spaces, virtual spaces. There's a sort of ambience about the place you walk into and how it makes you feel. It makes you feel up or down or positive or negative or whatever else. And so I think in a sense this is partly back to the discomfort with the workplace thing. We're sort of rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. We're replacing them with new deck chairs rather than fundamentally thinking about what we need from a place. And we're facing a lot of discomfort because it's taking us out of our, pardon the pun intended, with seats, but it's our comfort zone that we're being sort of driven out of. And I said this the other day, you know, it's easier to digitise our dysfunctions than it is to deal with them. It's easier to have an initiative, to put in new technology, to rebrand everything as autonomous or agile or whatever, than it is to actually sit down and think, why is this feeling uncomfortable? What are we going to do with it? And I call it the Google beanbag problem. You know, it's fascinating. I was 21 years at the BBC. At its best, it was an incredibly energetic, thoughtful, creative, to a tight deadline, to a budget type of a place. Yes, there was wastage. But John Byrne came in like some avenging angel with the whole business culture thing, which was layered on top of this culture, which ended up with all of us, as my dad used to call it, playing at shops, you know, having meetings instead of doing stuff. And I think the Google, and then the point was that we then used to take BBC managers to go and visit Google to see how Google worked. We knew how to do this. We were not allowed to do this because there was this whole clamp of business culture on top of it. And to me, WeWork is just the same thing tarted up a bit. Like I met somebody in WeWork the other day there, and I was saying about me feeling uncomfortable in workplaces, and he pointed up at this notice board that was full of all this creative, arty sort of stuff. And he said, you know, that's faux. He said, you know, the interior decorators put that up. He said, nobody ever uses that, it's not real. And that to me seems symptomatic of the challenge. So, I think the problem is that we are unwilling to face the fact that really we're talking about behaviour change. We're talking about behaviour change that's already beginning to happen. You know, like most things, it's not about artificially making something happen, it's about getting out of the way of something that's trying to happen and encouraging it, and getting your sleeves rolled up and getting involved in it. And that takes an attitude change. And again, I can remember one of the previous speakers, which George talked about, needing to train people and get. People need to learn, you know, and it's a different orientation. I think that, you know, this is what the internet's for. It's there to learn. It's what you can soak stuff up from. But we're still in this quite passive, well, I need somebody to train me in this kind of an environment. So it's a big, big attitude change. And I think it increasingly calls for leadership. So just taking the leap, starting to behave differently, starting to question things that probably feel dangerous to question. But until we start doing that, you know, the phrase lipstick on a pig, didn't come from nowhere. It's what most of us do. And so, having taken the mickey out of the word digital, phrased it digital transformation and collaboration, in its true sense, this is what it will take. Because again, I worry that the silos don't talk to each other. The technology, don't talk to HR, don't talk to facilities, don't talk to whatever. And that only happens one conversation at a time. And I was with somebody the other day there who said, we never talk about this stuff. He said, we all know it. It's also lurking in the background. We're all slightly terrified of it because we don't know what we're talking about. But unless people start to have one conversation at a time around some of these big challenges that we're facing, again, back to George's thing, I think we're in a really dangerous situation because we've got an old world. We've all said we're not going to mention Brexit. Look at Brexit in the States. We've got an old world falling apart at the moment at a rate of knots, and we're not spending enough time inventing the new one. Thank you.